Good evening, all. I'd like to call the Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 regular meeting of council to order. And before we get on to adoption of the agenda, I would like to send a shameless plug to my wife on her birthday. Happy birthday, my love. You can slap me when I get home.
At least you didn't attach a number to the birthday. So
I did not, for health reasons. And with that, we'll get on to 2.1, adoption of the agenda of this evening's meeting. Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Are there any additions, amendments, deletions? Hearing none, all in favor? It's carried. On to 3.1, adoption of the minutes of the February 14th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted. Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Mulyk. Are there any errors or omissions arising? I would like to add, thank you, Councillor Pearson, for chairing that meeting. I really appreciate it. Hearing none, all in favor? It's carried. 4.1, we do have a delegation this evening from BC Assessment, providing a 2023 assessment role review and highlights presented by Ms. Erin Smith. Welcome. The floor is yours. Typically a delegation is about 15 minutes, but if we're getting close to time, we'll just take a pause. We'll have a quick vote. If the council wishes, we'll extend.
There's a bit of preamble in the beginning that I can kind of go through quickly.
Awesome, thanks.
We can just, does this turn the TV on?
I'm not sure.
So just behind yourself, Dean, if you don't mind, there's a remote there. If we just get you the power for the television, that'd be much appreciated.
There it goes. Yep.
See green light on the wall. And if we did this correctly, it should just pop right up.
Windows is updating.
Perfect. Okay.
Incredible.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Erin Smith. I'm a Deputy Assessor with BC Assessment. Thanks for having us here. So I'll go through an overview of BC Assessment, what we do, and then also the 2023 assessment role, and then some particulars for the Village of Valemount. Okay, so topics, basically what I just mentioned. We're going to go through about us, how we do valuation, classification exemptions, assessment cycle and key dates, the relationship between what we do and what you do as a municipality, and then we'll go over the role overview for 2023. If you have questions while I'm speaking, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. It's totally fine to ask me while I'm doing it. So BC Assessment, we've been around since 1974, and we were commissioned basically out of a nonpartisan commission that was given the undertaking of deciding what would be the best way to go forward with assessment in British Columbia. The assessment valuation that we use is known to be the VARA system internationally, because we do use a classification-based system with variable tax rates. Our service commitment to both the public and to municipalities is to be open and transparent, to be fair and accurate, to be timely and accessible, to be knowledgeable and respectful, and to be innovative and collaborate with all of our property assessment partners. Our commitment to British Columbia, our vision is to be a dynamic and reliable assessment service provider that supports strong and vibrant communities in BC. Our mission is to create uniform assessments and be a trusted property information company. We most recently just did a value refresh, so we do have 4 new values. So we are here for each other. I have to actually look at these because we just did this. We own our experience, we are one team, and we are dedicated learners. We're committed to always learning new things. Our commitment to British Columbia, we have lots of different customers. We do have customers that are property owners, and we are dedicated to all of our property owners. There's residential, non-residential, both market and non-market properties. We're committed to you, local governments, and other Indigenous nations and other taxing authorities. And we do have commitment to the provincial government. We fall under the Ministry of Finance. So our main product The assessment role, I'm sure you're well aware what the assessment role is, but essentially this is an assessment of all real property in British Columbia. There's a little over, I think 2.14 where's where we're at, 2.14 million properties in BC, and we assess all of them. The assessment role basically contains information around ownership, classification, exemption for each property. We value different properties differently. So the majority of properties are valued on market value, which our valuation date is July 1st. Why market value? Market value is the most reliable and fair way to value properties, because this makes similar valued properties pay similar amounts of tax. What this means to you as a local government is that there will be fluctuations in the market, because markets go up, markets go down, and because we follow that fair market value, we also go up and down. And so that's probably a key takeaway for you, is the markets do change year over year. And we do consider each assessment cycle a brand new thing. Big picture is we do try and keep taxes distributed fairly, which is why we do every year reassess everything. Factors affecting market value. So there's all sorts of things, and location. It's true, that is a thing for real estate, and that has a big impact on the market value of a property. But other factors, land use controls, and this is where local government does come into play quite a bit. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Our land characteristics, this is everything from topography to if there's riparian rights, all sorts of different characteristics for land. When we get to improved properties, we do look at the characteristics of the improvements, such as age, condition, size, etc., all the things you would expect to value a property. And then we do have income producing properties. So a lot of commercial properties we do value on income. So we take into account rental rates, expense rates, vacancy rates, capitalization rates. One of the fundamentals of market value is highest and best use. And this is really where working together helps us come to the best valuation for a property. So in order to be at a highest and best use, the property needs to be valued in whatever is physically possible. So depending on size, topography, what can you physically build on that property? Legally permissible, this is where you come in when we're looking at OCP, zoning, any other restrictive covenants, anything like that, that does impact the value of a property. Financially feasible. So essentially, if you're a developer and you're going to develop a property, you're not going to build something that's not going to make any money. So it does need to be improvements that would cause you to have a rate of return on the property. And then maximally productive, as a developer, again, you're going to build the thing that is going to make you the most. So we consider the highest and best use. However, a property would be improved that would have the best return for the property. And so this is one of the things that land use. This is where this collaboration between local governments and ourselves really comes into play, because anytime anything is done for zoning, OCP changes, things like that, that does impact how the property could be used, and that does impact the highest and best use. So that's where working together is really important for us to be aware of any changes that are going on. Other things that come through, there's all sorts of different things affecting market value. If you're having a boundary extension, that can impact it. I believe you guys have done that pretty recently. So anything like that can definitely impact the value of a property. Any changes to the population when there's turnover, if different neighborhoods are suddenly under redevelopment for new uses, that obviously can impact the property as well. So how we classify properties, there are 9 different property classes. Number 1 is residential. Roughly 70-75% of most properties in the province fall into that classification. Class 2 is utilities, so this is what we consider long and skinny things, such as hydro lines, telephone lines, phone lines, etc. Class 3 is supportive housing. This is housing that is deemed to be necessary for the good of the public, and in order to be in this classification, it must be granted through an order in council. Class 4 is major industry, so mills, mines, etc. Anything that is a prescribed capacity would fall into Class 4. Class 5 is light industry, which is more like manufacturing, producing a product, not such big scale as the major industry. So class 6 is a funny one. That's our business and other. And I always like to say the and other. So this is a catch-all class. The definition of class 6 is anything that isn't in a different class. So everything, all sorts of things, parts of churches, parts of halls, retail, banks, all sorts of things are in class 6. So that it's important to remember the business and other because there's lots of stuff in class 6. Class 7 is managed forest. This is anything that is under a timber management plan. Important to know about that one, it is a market rate for the land, but every second year it will fluctuate because the timber value gets added every second year. And then class 8, again, this is a little bit of a misnomer on this one, recreational and nonprofit. Does not mean everything that's a nonprofit gets class 8. It's mostly recreational for land only, such as parks, playing fields, etc. The nonprofit actually refers to places of public worship or fraternal nonprofit organizations, so not just any nonprofit. And then class 9 is farmland, which is a regulated, legislated rates. By having different classifications, we're able to enact the variable tax rate, which is where you are able to set your different tax rates for the different classes so that you can shift the tax burden throughout the different property classes as you see fit. And exemptions. So this is something you're probably also familiar with. So properties have many different types of exemptions that exempt them from paying all or a portion of tax assessed by a municipality. The common exemptions are permissive, which would be something granted by a taxing jurisdiction, or statutory, which is something granted under legislation. In a municipality, it's likely granted under the community charter, though there are some things that fall into other, such as the School Act, Local Government Act, etc. So our assessment cycle, key dates, January 1st to 31st. This is our, what we call inquiry period. This is when the notices go out and we have all the property owners calling us, asking questions, which is what we like. We always advise if you have a question, please do call us. And the date to appeal to the first level of review is January 31st. I'll talk about appeals a little bit later. February 1st to March 31st, we consider this our revised roll time. We are sitting through PERP panels, the Property Assessment Review Panel, and getting ready to put out the revised roll. April 1st to September 30th. This is sort of our production time. If we have any assessment projects we need to complete, inspection of new construction, all the things that we need to get the data ready to set the next roll is done during this time. And I would just note the second level of appeal, the deadline is April 30th. And then October 1st to December 31st, this is our key role setting time. This is when we're setting the models. We're setting what we call MACMs, which are mass appraisal market modifiers, which are what we use to determine the assessment rates based on the sales that we see all year. So lots of work going in this time. October 31st is the deadline, one, physical condition and permitted use of a property, but also the deadline for us to receive or for you to pass permissive exemption bylaws. So that's a key date for you, October 31st. Those have to be passed by that date. November 30th is the last day that we can reflect LTSA changes in our roll because there's a bit of a delay between the feed from LTSA and when we get that. So November 30th, ownership changes up till then will be reflected on the roll. Everything else we have to put through a review period. And then December 31st is the ownership on title. That's who's liable for taxation. So the relationship between assessment, what we do, and taxation, the portion that you do. So we create the assessed value. We are independent of taxing jurisdictions. Our assessed value comes out January 1st, and then the property tax rates, that's where you come in and you set your property tax rates based on your budgetary requirements. And then those two things multiplied together come to the property taxes payable, which are typically due first business day in July, unless you're on an alternate set schedule. So impact of changes in assessed value. Now this is something we get a lot of calls about, hearing, oh, my assessment went up 30%. I can't afford for my taxes to go up 30%. So we've been really trying really hard to educate the public, and that's not necessarily how it's going to go. This actually is a screenshot from something that is on an assessment notice. So essentially it's more important what the average of that property class did and how your property moved in relation to the average. So if your property class went up less than the average, your taxes are likely to decrease. If your property tax assessment went up the same as the average, your property taxes will likely stay the same. If your property went up more than the average, your property taxes are likely to increase. All of those scenarios assume no change in the tax rates. If the tax rates change, of course, there's probably going to be a little fluctuation in everybody's, but so it's not necessarily a one-to-one ratio. My assessment went up, my taxes are going to go up. And so that's just really important for property owners to understand, because that's a huge concern usually. So 2023, this is the province as a whole. We assessed 2.16 million properties this year for a little over $2.72 trillion. This was up about 12% from 2022. Non-market change, which is typically new construction, was down 1% from 2022, but still added $13.52 billion to the roll. Property class 1, the residential, was approximately 77% of the entire roll for the province. So for Valemount specifically, so your roll, there was 869 properties, which is 2 more than in 2022. And your total value of your roll was $327.5 million, which was about a 24.8% increase from 2022. And I would note that that increase, I think it was about 2.3% was from non-market change, so new construction. The rest of that, the majority of that, was from market movement, from the market moving up. Your new construction was up quite a bit, 78.5% over 2022. So a lot more new construction happening here last year, I would assume. And then your residential class 1 was about 70% of your roll, which is pretty much in line with most municipalities.
We'll just take a quick pause.
Sure, yeah.
What's council's wish? Looking for an extension, moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor MacLean. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you for your patience.
So your completed roll for Valemount for 2023, residential single family, the average increase was 25 to 30%. And again, this is based on sales in the market in 2022, centering around the July 1st date. Commercial industrial saw a 0 to 16%, depending on the type of property. So the appeal process. In January, the property owners have an option to call in and ask us questions, and if they disagree with our assessment, they are welcome to appeal to the Property Assessment Review Panel. This is the first level of appeal. The review panel, as well as the subsequent Property Assessment Appeal Board, are completely independent of us. They are designated by the ministry, and we have no affiliation with them. So from February 1st to March 15th, we sit in review panel. Typically these hearings last about 30 to 45 minutes for the appellants to present their evidence, we present our evidence, and the panels make a decision based on what they've seen at that hearing. Depending on the outcome of that appeal, of the review, they then have the option to appeal to the Property Assessment Appeal Board if they're unhappy with the Property Assessment Review Panel. I would also note that we also have the option to go to the Appeal Board. So if a decision happens through PARP that BC Assessment doesn't feel is equitable and doesn't feel is correct, we can appeal a property to PAB as well, which we don't do it that often, but every once in a while there's a decision that we just feel is just not equitable for everybody, and we do take it to PAB. Yeah. And so PAB, the deadline to appeal to PAB is April 30th, and then that process does not have a designated timeline. It's always our intention to have it done before the next roll. It doesn't always happen, it really depends. Sometimes there's coordinated property groups that are hundreds of properties across the province. It takes a little longer usually. So that process is a lot more time. There's no time limit for that board. They can request quite a few different documents. We have quite a few meetings, so it actually is a much lengthier process. Completed roll acceptance. So typically we see between 97 and 98% acceptance of the roll. So you can see the province line is the lighter green and Valemount is the darker. So not necessarily following the same trend line, but still within the same sort of percentage brackets that we expect. Yeah. And then change completed roll to revised roll. So this is essentially how does the roll change from when we do the roll January 1st to after the PARP session, the first review period. And again, here you can see Valemount Doesn't necessarily follow the same trend line as the province, but again, sort of sticks within the same % change overall.
We're our own tradition.
You definitely are. And we do find that. I guess I would say I've been an appraiser in northern BC. I was born and raised in Prince George, so always in northern BC, and we don't really follow what happens in the rest of the province across the board for northern BC. Yeah. And so collaborating with us. So basically by sharing with us, sharing information and working together, it's a really good opportunity for us to make sure that we're really on top of what's happening in all the communities, especially when it comes to any sort of changes to the zoning, to the OCP. If you're seeing anything in your community that you think would help us have a better indication of how the market's going, definitely share that. There's a number of things that we send out requests for, such as your bylaws, for permissive exemptions, revitalization exemptions. We typically send out reminders in the summertime for all of those things, but definitely you're always welcome to give us a call if you have a question about something or send us information you think we should have, because it really helps us out, because we do value a lot of properties, so it's really helpful when you send us the information and we're not out there looking for it. There is information sharing. I believe you're probably already set up on Citrix ShareFile to share all those types of things with us. Digital documents is kind of the preferred method these days, electronic documents. Some building plans, all that sort of thing coming in through digitally really helps us to collect things. Yeah. We do send data collectors out throughout the year to actually physically go take pictures and measurements, but having a building plan definitely saves us a lot of steps. Sharing of permits is also very important. That's the trigger that allows us to know there's changes on a property. Additional resources. So if you ever have questions from constituents who are wondering about things, the first line would be our website. We have a lot of information on our website. You can look up a property, you can look at the neighboring properties, you can look at sales. There's a lot of information on our website, and it's where we send people first and say, go take a look at this, and then if you still have questions, come back to us. Property information trends, there's an interactive map. We have information about the appeal process. So a lot of information on our website. So I would really say if you have anybody asking questions about assessments, to direct them there. And then on the website, there's obviously information on how to contact us if they still have questions. And then additional resources. The gov.bc site does have information about both levels of appeal, both the appeal board and the review panel, homeowners grant, and also property tax deferral programs. There's lots of information on there for them as well. Any questions? Hopefully I got through that as quickly as I...
A motion to receive. Councillor Blanchette, second by Councillor MacLean. Questions for the delegation? Thank you, Ms. Smith, on behalf of council.
Yeah, you're welcome.
First and foremost, I'll throw it to my colleagues. Well, I can start this parade off.
Sure.
Can you describe any revenue streams that supports the BC assessment body, or is the BCA a basic expense line item under the Ministry of Finance?
So we are actually self-funded through property taxes. We are a line item on property assessment notices, or on the tax notices that go in. So that is where so we are a Crown corporation, but we're sort of self-funded. Yeah, we're
through taxation.
Through taxation, yes.
Okay.
But we do not the ministry does not collect from like income taxes or anything and then pay us. It does come through property taxes. We're a line item in the property tax notice.
Well, you'll always be flush, I'm guessing.
Well, it takes a lot of people to get it out there. Yeah. Yes.
One question, who's on the appeal panel? Who are the people?
So on the appeal panel, it depends on which panel. So for the assessment review panel, that is the first level appeal. Those are typically constituents in a bunch of different neighborhoods, a bunch of different locations that they're delegated by the ministry, not our ministry. They are under, I want to say Ministry of Housing, but I think they might have changed. We're Ministry of Finance, so we're not actually under the same ministry. So they are designated, and then they usually, I think, have a 2-year contract, and they're just peers. They're just people from the community. They do not have to have any specific property information. They do not have to have any specific qualifications. They're just designated, and they sit and they listen to the evidence. So that first level appeal is much more of a review of your peers. The Property Assessment Appeal Board, that is based out of Richmond, although they do have members all across the province. They tend to be property actual like realtors, lawyers, people who actually have information on property tax and law. So that level of appeal is a lot more sophisticated than the first level. And I would say even PAB, so if there's a PAB decision, those can be appealed to the BC Supreme Court, the BC Court of Appeals, on a point of law. So if there is a ruling that somebody disagrees with, they can potentially go to a further court. Typically, did the board err in law on their decision as such, because it's not actually about the valuation, the exemption, etc. It's on a point of law. So we do have cases that sometimes go right to Court of Appeals, and then sometimes it's in our favor and we just keep doing our thing. Sometimes it's not, and we have to potentially change something we're doing or go down the path of enabling a legislation change, because usually it's kind of problematic wording in the legislation. Yeah, so, yeah.
Follow up, Councillor? Next in line. On the appeal, above the appealant, has there been examples of an appeal put forward by the BCA that is actually in favor of the appealant? Are you generally winning most of those?
No, I would say at the first level of appeal, the review panel, we lose most of those. So, which is why we end up taking some of them to the second level of appeal in times. No, so I guess I could mention that when somebody calls us in January, if they have an issue or a problem with their property, and we take a look and we're like, you're right, there is an error, we can correct that and do something we call a bypass. So we don't have to go to panel, and we'll make that correction within the revised rule on our own. So that would sort of be the situation where we're agreeing with the information they're providing to us. Typically, by the time we get to the second level appeal at the PAB board, there's a much larger issue, and we're not typically in agreement with them. In some instances, it does mean getting lawyers involved in actual hearings, and it can get fairly complicated. Yeah. So typically, PAB is appeals that are done by agents, not property owners themselves. So property tax agents.
Oh, and just one final comment for those out there. I totally agree with the, please check the BC Assessment website. Registration is totally free. Login is quite easy, and it gives you access to a whole bunch of historical realms, not only on your property, but neighboring property. So kudos to BC Assessment. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Yep.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So when somebody does make that call, do you ever come down and do a visual on the property, or is it usually something that can be dealt with over the phone?
Typically we try and deal with it over the phone because we get a lot of calls, and having to send people out in the field is a little more time consuming, but we definitely do go do inspections if it's something that requires that. Lots of times those do fall to the second level of appeal simply because of time constraints. PARP absolutely has to be done. The last day we're allowed to have hearings is March 15th. So time constraints for that first review. We typically will not do inspections during that period of time. It's also February to March 15th, so it's not ideal for traveling to inspect the things. But yes, we definitely do go out and reviews. We'll even also, if a property owner calls in and says there's certain damages or something, we'll ask them to send us photos. Like we will take that self-reporting information as well. Yeah.
If there's no other questions or comments, thank you, Ms. Smith, for taking the time to visit us and giving an overview of BC Assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any comments, discussion on the delegation? All in favor of receipt? It's carried. And Ms. Smith, please do not feel obligated to sit through a council meeting. As much as I appeal to how exciting this can be, we're now moving into a reading file. So, is there under section 7? Is there any thing in the reading file that council would like to surface? Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, a couple things I'd like to look at. First, number one, from Municipal Affairs, the Growing Community Fund. Really looking forward to hearing what the results of that will be towards Valemount, and
Community allocation in general.
Yeah, so exciting to see. And also number 2, disappointing that we were not successful in getting the internship for I have to read it off here, Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. Hopefully the work continues in the area with the study, but without the use of an intern here.
Well, I can assure you that the work of Dr. Shea and his team will continue, but I'm with you that it will be, we won't be housing or having external workforce join us.
Mm-hmm. That's it for me, thanks.
Thank you. Others? If there's nothing else, moving on to administrative reports, section 10. 8.1, the wind ring proposal. There's a couple of recommendations that council can consider this evening, and the first one would be, prior to council deciding whether or not to move forward, the proponent be asked to provide further information on the proposal, including detailed costs or regulatory requirements, or that council just receive and file the report. Councillor Blanchette?
I would move recommendation 1.
That, prior to council deciding, that staff reach out to the proponent. Seconded by Councillor Pearson. Discussion. Councillor Pearson?
Along with that, I would like to see a delegation by the proponent versus a paper file, to have the opportunity to ask questions. In looking at this proposal, I mean, it's a very exciting idea, but again, nothing is done for nothing. So what the final costs are for the proposed second and third units has me a little worried.
Amendment moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Blanchette. Discussion on the amendment. All in favor on the amendment? Discussion on the original motion. The amendment is carried. On the original motion, further discussion? Thank you for the amendment, by the way. All in favor? It's carried.
I covered off the discussion part, so.
You sure did. It's a long motion. 8.2, Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways Program for Indigenous Engagement Grants application. Recommendation here, the council directs staff to apply for the Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways Program Indigenous Engagement Grants for up to $150,000 over 3 years to support consultation activities between the Village of Valemount and Simp First Nation. Moved by Councillor Blanchette, second by Councillor Mulyk. Discussion. Let's go a long ways in supporting.
Yeah.
All in favor? It's carried. 8.3, we do have a proposed section 57 notice on title to consider at 1144 6th Avenue. And with a recommendation that council directs the corporate officer, as authorized by section 57 of the community charter, to place a notice on title for the property located at 1144 6th Avenue, legally described as DL 7355 Plan 9689, Lot 13, PID 012791687, regarding the installation of a wood-burning appliance with an accessory building and occupying a structure without an occupancy permit, contrary to both the BC Building Code and village bylaws. What's council's wish? Moved by Councillor Pearson, second by Councillor Blanchette. Discussion. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, a couple questions on this. One, I'm wondering if the accessory building is still being occupied without an occupation permit. Through you to staff.
I'd refer to our building inspectors. You may have more accurate information at this time, but my impression is that as far as we are aware, that it is being occupied. Anything different to that effect at this time?
No, I was actually contacted by the current tenant today, so that would indicate that it is being occupied still.
Just note for those watching at home, there was a response by the building services that there was in contact with the tenant recently, therefore the building is occupied. Follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up to that. This is not a new issue. This has been ongoing for a period of time. I'd like to know what further action is available versus just putting a title on the property as far as the cease and desist order to have that dwelling vacated, since it is not permitted for occupation at this point. As we continue to let things go the easy way, it just will continue to go. So I'm just curious what other actions are available.
Mr. Dipino?
Staff would certainly be able to come back with a full list of what levers may be available to encourage compliance in this matter. One element would certainly be continued pursuit of the bylaw infractions and the fines around that. I do understand that there is one fine that is with collections at this time. In addition to that, there may be some other levers that certainly could be pursued. I'm happy to report back to council on what those may be.
Good.
Councillor Blanchette?
This has been going on since August 2021. I'm wondering why the RCMP have not been involved and why this person is still living in this place. This is, like, why? Like, just putting something on there, like, they haven't even paid their fine. We need to do something immediate, I think. And I think calling the RCMP and saying this is what's going on. This is also a danger to whoever's living in that place. We don't know anything about how it was built or anything. I mean, so this is wrong on so many levels. Have the RCMP been called since August 2021 ever?
Mr. Dipino?
To the best of my knowledge, the RCMP are not involved in this matter. Seeking if there's other information available just due to the timeline of the incident. Any other comment on the staff team around potential RCMP involvement? Seeing none, I believe that is the case, Councillor, that this matter hasn't been referred to law enforcement in that sense, and that the bylaw and building pieces have been the chosen method for attempting to reach compliance at this time. The notice on title option serves to give protection to future purchasers potentially of the property, so they are aware of the infractions, while the other issues are attempted to be addressed. As you'll see in the report, there's comment around both the structure itself, its use at this time and occupation, as well as the wood burning appliance. So able to move out those pieces through those other means so far.
I would add an amendment that we contact the RCMP immediately and find out what we can do to vacate this person out of that building.
Moved by Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure RCMP are the first step, but I mean, definitely something proactive in this. Unfortunately, they're making more rent than we're charging in fines, so we're not winning at this point. So again, it's another case of putting the cart before the horse, and begging forgiveness after the fact. And we're seeing it way too often on too many files that build it and then ask permission to build it. So I agree we need to move forward. I just not sure RCMP are the resource to be the next step, but we need to be proactive.
I would comment that I think we can, through a note with a notice on title, it is a immediate next step. The fact that we are receiving communication from the tenant allows us the opportunity to further engage with the property owner. And I think nobody wins if we just go down there with a bulldozer and get out. It's winter. But I do agree with you around compliance under the building code. We really have zero idea of the work that has been done. It's never been reviewed or stamped by building services. So, yeah, further discussion around the amendment?
Could we ask the RCMP to accompany our building supervisor bylaw officer to go and have a discussion? If the tenant is reaching out to you, then maybe there's can be a discussion there, and maybe this person doesn't get evicted today in the snowbank, but there's some conversation with the RCMP present.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I suppose the question that comes to my mind would just be about the parties involved. So at the moment, we, as I gather, have significant concern with the property owner who's engaged in these activities and so far hasn't reached compliance despite the attempts. I don't know that the same feeling is applied to the tenant in this case, who would be the one suffering potentially from, an eviction of some sort. The second piece would be around jurisdiction, and I'm not sure if the RCMP would be the ones to settle the tenancy dispute. I'm unclear on the piece. I appreciate that the safety element there around the provincial legislation for the building code is the piece that is, I think, most concerning around the safety of the facility is what I'm hearing. So I would certainly be able to follow up with the RCMP to determine if it's themselves or somebody through another one of the agencies who deal with building who ought to be there to affect the greatest change. But at this time, I'm not sure if it's the RCMP specifically that would be most appropriate to attend, or if it would have the effect on the owner who is off-site from the village versus the tenant, if that makes sense.
So the owner of the house is not living in the house? He has a tenant in the house and in the accessory building?
From the correspondence we have at this time, and to the staff team present, do please correct my comment if I'm mistaken, but the secondary dwelling or the secondary structure is, as we understand it, best to our knowledge, occupied where the concern exists. We understand that the principal owner's address is updated to be in the lower mainland, southern part of the province, and that they've been out and away from Valemount for some period of time. Our first contact with the owner in some time happened just yesterday at about 11 a.m., which you'll note from your council package is about 50 minutes before the new deadline. We understand from their comments that they're interested in trying to reach compliance. We made a commitment to the homeowner that we would pass that on to council, that they had reached out and suggested they would like to reach compliance. But they have suggested that they are not aware of any of the correspondence from here unto now. Our assessment and per the recommendation is that that may not be the case. We think that there's sufficient communication that has taken place to suggest that this notice on title is a reasonable next step. As well as whatever council might wish to do from here forward around additional measures. So to summarize that, I'm unclear on the residency of the primary home. The secondary structure we understand to be occupied. The home we understand not to be occupied at this time by the owner. The owner is not in Valemount to the best of our knowledge.
Follow-up, Councillor?
I'm just trying to think. Just this kind of thing annoys me because there's rules and the people aren't following the rules, and this is a safety issue, and the Clean Air Task Force has built you can't have a wood burning appliance in an accessory building, and they've gone and done that, and they've put a person, it could be a family for all we know, with kids in there, and we don't know the safety of the structure. So and it's very great that this guy's living in Vancouver, far away from this, and he, all of a sudden, the last 10 minutes, he says, okay, I'll help you, and he hasn't paid this fine that, like you said, is, probably nothing, and this has been going on for so long, and it's really frustrating,
Perhaps we can get back to the original motion.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll vote on the amendment to connect with the RCMP. to get a understanding of where jurisdictions lie. You're okay with that?
Yeah, I was under the understanding that the owner was living in the home. So to, send the muscle, as it were, would sort of defeat the purpose. But I just think that we need to do what we can so that this doesn't happen again, like Councillor Pearson says, because we are finding a lot of these things are coming up and they shouldn't be. So we have to be a bit more.
Reach out to our RCMP partners.
Yeah, well, we just need to be a little more, noticing what's going on a bit more.
On the amendment, all in favor?
Yeah.
It's
Sorry
carried.
that I yakkered on.
Back to the original motion discussion. Do you have a follow-up on that?
I don't think so. Sorry.
Then on the original motion, section 57, notice on title at 1144 6th Avenue, all in favor? It's carried. Well, moving on to happier times, 8.4. We have a municipal donation request for a 100th, thank you, Mr. Schneider, for a 100th birthday celebration for our very own Alice Olson. And we're looking for council to approve a grant to Sherry Tinsley in the amount of $318.15 to cover the cost of the community hall rental for a 100th birthday celebration for Alice Olson. Moved by Councillor Pearson, second by Councillor Mulyk. Discussion. Councillor Pearson?
Just quick clarification, just in the wording, just so everybody is aware out there. So in the approval of a grant in the amount of, there is no physical cash transaction, it's strictly a line item to pay for the rentals.
Debit has to be credit in order to have the bottom line.
Perfect, thank you.
No, because we can't waive fees anymore.
But for people to understand, that's.
We are waiving fees without waiving fees. And council will also note the invitation, so please reach out to,
Do we have a time? Because we have a date but no time. Does anybody know?
I'm sure that'll be a follow-up through either social media presence or when you do talk to Ms. Tinsley about, I'd like to join you.
Staff can also follow up on the time, Councillor. Be happy to get that information.
Perfect, thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Congratulations to Alice, that's marvelous.
Yeah, it is. It's carried. 8.5, considering a temporary use permit 2302 at 1292 Fowler Place, with a recommendation that TUP 2302 for 1292 Fowler Place, legally described as Lot 21, District Lot 7355, Caribou District Plan EPP 66975, proposing a TUP for a period of 2 years be given initial approval. Moved by Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor Mulyk. Discussion.
Well, this has been working very well.
I think so. Further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. 8.6, we have a report to be received for the Columbia Basin Trust Ready Grants Program Public Input Process for 2023. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Blanchette. Discussion on receipt. Everyone's ready for March 5th? Got your electronic votes in? Ready for public input? Awesome. All in favor of receipt? It's carried. And finally, under 9.1, road closure bylaw number 872, 2023. We're looking that road closure bylaw number 872, 2023 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor MacLean. Discussion on final adoption. All in favor? It's carried. There was no new business as far as I know. Does anybody have a notice of motion to bring forward? Then I'll move to council reports, 12.1. We'll go to this side of the room, Councillor Mulyk.
Alrighty, on February 21st, I attended a Tourism Valemount meeting. On February 23rd, a CBT adjudication committee, and we started reviewing the proposals. And that was, we're really looking forward to next weekend, next Sunday.
How many do you have?
8. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Mulyk. Councillor Blanchette.
So on the 23rd, I was a judge for the elementary school science fair, and it was fantastic. It was so much fun. It was so interesting seeing what ideas the kids had come up with. I mean, it was just, you know, and the smarts that went into the thought, and it was just incredible. It was really hard to mark everything too, because you're like, and it was very successful. All the kids had a good time. The school, you walk down the hallway like this, and you're looking at everything, and all the kids are hyper and full of sugar, and it was a really good experience. And congratulations to all of them, because it was really well done and a lot of fun. I'd like to, even if I just go next year, not even as a judge, just to see all of what the kids were doing and stuff. And they all had a good time. They all really enjoyed it, and it was throughout the school. So no matter where you went, there was something to see, and a volcano here, and lemons hanging there, and it was great. So that was on the 23rd, and on the 23rd, we had a wayfinding meeting, and we're looking at where we're going to be placing the signage throughout town. So that was it.
Sorry, who had a wayfinding meeting?
I don't know what we're sort of called. What are we called?
Kind of the
Sign committee, I guess? Yeah. Yeah,
Didn't
there's,
know we had one.
well, there's myself, Councillor Pearson, our CAO, and our EDO.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the official title, but I understand that there's been a bit of a working group around the project for some time.
Fair enough.
So that was the 4 of us there.
Yeah.
Not a committee.
Yeah, we're just a group. A group of crazies.
Thank you for doing that. Councillor MacLean.
My report is old, as I was away the last meeting, so I'll report back to Monday, January 30th, when I had a local governments committee negotiations update meeting for round 15 of the Columbia Basin Trust treaty negotiations, and then a local government committee strategy session after that. That evening from 6 to 8, we're still talking January 30th, I participated in a webinar with the local government committee public online meeting to share information about the Columbia River Treaty Local Governments Committee's efforts to integrate social and economic objectives into river management scenario modeling for the Columbia River Treaty renewal. This session focused on interests associated with the Columbia River. On February 1st and 2nd, along with the rest of council and staff, I participated in the strategic planning sessions for the village facilitated by Doug Fleming. And on February the 3rd, I sat on the Columbia River Treaty negotiations update for CBRAC. Again, about round 15 of negotiations. And that was it.
Thank you so much. That's round 15, eh? That's we're to round 15.
And then the next round is mid-month of March.
Well, we are getting pretty close to 2024.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Okay, in the absence of the mayor on February 15th and 16th, I attended Regional District Fraser Fort George, first the Committee of the Whole meeting, which was budget discussions. I kind of planned for the afternoon, being there was a 320-page agenda, which we covered off in just over an hour, so I had a little time to kill on that one. They moved through it pretty quick. The second day was committee and the regular meetings of the regional district. Also on the February 23rd, I joined Councillor Blanchette for the elementary school science fair. Definitely an eye-opener. Luckily, we've done it once and know how to judge for next time, because it was a challenge. There was some really great projects. I was happy to see all the projects involved Coke and Mentos were strictly photographic and not live experiments in the room, because I could just picture that going wrong. But, you know, varying degrees of enthusiasm and just looking at the thought processes, especially when you were looking at the primary projects. It was it was interesting to see how their minds work. So, and then again, also with Councillor Blanchette, the working group. I guess it'd be basically an RMI funding working group. Previously, we worked on the benches and garbage can placements for the Bigfoot Trail, and now we're looking at wayfinding signage to draw people off the highway and guide them into the core of our beautiful downtown. And I have a couple items to bring up. Motions to do with Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. First, their AGM is coming up May 5th in Edmonton, and I would be looking for council support to attend that meeting. It's on a Friday, so travel.
Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Blanchette, that Councillor Pearson, in his role with the TCYHA, attend their AGM. Discussion, all in favor? It's carried.
Thank you. And secondly, we had a request brought forward by a local business, and in that it's looking at traffic patterns on Highway 16 through the park, and basically asking for an upgrade on the West Park Gate, having to do with traffic delays and stuff during peak. Things, I mean, a couple things we talked about in discussing the resolution were economic impact when you've got trucks sitting for half an hour in line, waiting for tourist traffic to get their brochures and stuff and what to see in the park. Environmental, I mean, you've got all those vehicles idling for an extended period of time. And just traveler safety, because as soon as you've been held up for half an hour, you're trying to make up that time on the other end. So, excuse me, I drafted a quick resolution looking for council support, and also to forward this on to possibly NCLGA for their resolution session. And do I need to read?
No, I can read it for you.
Oh, okay.
Whereas all commercial truck traffic that passes through the east gate of Jasper National Park also passes through the west gate of the park. And whereas Highway 16 and 5, the Yellowhead Highway, are the primary transportation corridors for commercial, tourism, and local traffic, and the designated oversized route for industrial traffic movements. Therefore, be it resolved, a letter be written to the Government of Canada, Parks Canada, requesting that the west gate of Jasper National Park be upgraded to be consistent with the east gate improvements that have been recently completed and are proving beneficial to all travelers. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Mulyk. Discussion on the proposed resolution. Councillor Blanchette.
We just came through there yesterday, and yeah, it would be good to see go, you know, because we have been all in line, and then all of a sudden, phew, everybody's just shooting down the road a mile a minute, right? So, yeah.
All in favor? It's carried.
Thank you. And then one last note, I sat today, I did a online training session that was put together by the Simp First Nation. Very good online training session, very informative on just discussing communication and respect for their land, so.
No, it's a great learning tool. Thank you very much. I too have to go back into January, as I was not present for the February 14th council meeting. With that, January 25th, had a committee of the whole meeting with the Regional District Fraser Fort George budget. So the overall administrative budget, a little more than 380 pages. The next morning, I had an opportunity to meet with the regional manager, Derek Baker, and his colleague, Christina Dahl of Pacifican. They're formerly known as the Western Diversification Fund. We had a great discussion around different funding models and a quick look at the suite of their programs. Later that day, had a Regional District Phase of Fort George open board meeting. And then the next day, got right back here for the Columbia Basin Trust board meeting. Chair Carver has appointed me to their housing committee as chair, director on their investments committee, director to the Columbia Basin Broadband Corp, and newly to their executive committee. Thank you. And then followed up with the conclusion on January 28th of their Columbia Basin Trust Board meeting. January 30th, had a core funding discussion with Simp First Nation, First Nations Major Projects Coalition, and Colliers and Associates around percentages and what that core might look like. First and second was day 1 and 2 of our strategic planning session. Thank you so much to both council and senior administration for your valuable input to Mr. Fleming's facilitation. February 6 and 7, under an invite from Chief Lampro, Simp First Nation, as well as various other encouragement, Mr. Pryor and I whisked down to Richmond for the Old Growth Strategy Recommendations multi-sectoral planning session. It was 2 days put on by the province. In this case, about out of the 120 participants in the room, there was a 2/3 non-government organizations, such as some e-NGOs. There was some industry in the room, and unfortunately, there was only myself, Mayor Runts from McBride, and Councillor Frankel from Vanderhoof, who were local government representatives. Our First Nations partners were not invited to this session, and so George thought it would be a good idea that ourselves, McBride, Carrier Lumber, Simp, Valemount Community Forest attend. And Gilbert Smith, pardon me, out of Barrier, because they're one of our major trading partners, attend, and to at least get an understanding of what the province might be heading towards, and with that, I would be looking to for council's financial support for just my per diem. Valemount Community Forest is covering all the travel. We'll be billing them as such, but I would be looking for council support for per diem. It'd be 2 half days and 2 full days, so a maximum of 3. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Blanchette. Discussion. I have more to follow. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, council. One of the major key takeaways was this is a top-down approach from Victoria, not even through the regional managers or regional district managers. This is the Premier setting targeted dates of a declaration around old growth management by April, and a implementation by October. So very fast, very swift. Extremely happy that the group from the North Thompson Robson Valley was able to attend. It's good timing in terms of a more recent announcement on February 15th, where there is a plan looking to be put into place that includes the formation of a regional forest landscape planning. And both ourselves from a local government, Simp, and industry do support, personally support the actions to protect old growth forests, but state that when it comes to decisions involving management within our valleys, it should be left to First Nations in collaboration with local governments. Chief Lampro really agrees with that statement by saying that we have an excellent working relationship with our local government and forest industry partners within the territory, and we work very well together and support each other. And so with that, I would be looking for council's support in joining not an official coalition of the North Thompson Robson Valley, but a working group as we work towards old growth management, and by taking part in an open statement to Victoria with SIMP, the Village of McBride, ourselves, looking for both a fine line in well-managed old growth being integral to both the multiple economic sectors, such as not just forestry, but backcountry tourism and recreation, biodiversity, and how we will continue to support SIMP taking the lead on old growth management within their territory. I would be looking for a resolution to such effect. Moved by Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor Mulyk. Discussion.
Working groups are always great because you get everything coming in.
Yeah.
So it's only going to benefit.
It will, I guarantee it. And to see us just even at the registration table, no badges for us. It was like, who are you? What are you doing here? Oh, you'll find, let me tell you. And Mayor Runts, I have to say, knocked it out of the park. Both being a registered professional forester and a community-driven leader, he was spot on both days. Councillor Pearson.
Is there any further word on when the follow-up sessions will be held?
The regional forest landscape planning tables sometime in March, maybe in Prince George. There's been no follow-up on, is there one in Kamloops, is there one in Cranbrook, is there one in Revelstoke, Golden? We're really at the back end of any sort of news release.
And will invitations be extended to the latecomers to the last?
I would hope. I would hope that our voice was heard. We had truth to power. And in fact, we had folks coming to our table throughout that planning session saying, "Ooh, yeah, we didn't know that you guys worked together so well." Yeah, so, I mean, we did make a standing offer to the Associate Deputy Minister that if he's ever through this way, bring your hiking boots, we'll go for a walk, you can see how we manage. And I think he's gonna take us up on that offer. Follow up?
So one other thing, and I find it ongoing disappointment in our provincial government that very little beyond hope exists. The announcement of the new chair of the Forest Practices Board only caught my eye because of the title, and then when I looked at it, the only person that does not live on the island on that board is from Williams Lake. There is absolutely zero northern representation. Forest practices are different all over the province, and it would be nice to have a little more varied input in that process as well.
Well, as is the coastal old growth versus the interior old growth.
Yeah.
So,
Can we send something down?
pardon?
Can we send something to that committee saying, hey, perhaps there needs to be some more slots open for?
Well, I think we should look at some of their initial findings, and then we can certainly comment as a I hate the word coalition, but working group.
As a group?
Yeah. If there's nothing more on that motion, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
If we could, Your Worship, just clarify the language of that resolution. If I understand properly, we have a resolution to participate in an unofficial joint coalition around trade and old growth management in the North Thompson with our regional partners as described.
And to work with the SIMP Nation on communication strategy.
Thank you.
Is that fine with council? Thank you. And then just before we caught flight, had a discussion with Northern Health Authority on excessive idling, to your point. February 15th, again from afar, took in the forestry funding announcement for First Nations and forest landscape planning, which exactly was in line to, you go to these meetings and you stomp your feet and you jump up and down, and then the very next day or the very next week, they announce something that you were really passionate and fighting about, and they could have just took you aside and said, don't say anything, but we got something coming, February 27th, had an initial meeting for the Local Government Leadership Academy Elected Official Seminar, asking myself to sit on a mentorship panel while we're in Prince George. And then February 28th, today, it was budget day here in BC. Moving from I hope I got this right, $5.7 billion surplus to a $4.5 billion deficit-ish. That is my report. Motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Mulyk, second by Councillor Blanchette. Discussion on the, one more question on, I'll go to you first and then.
What was the outcome of the discussion with Northern Health about idling? Because I had a run-in with somebody today about it.
There was an agreement to send a joint letter to our industrial partners here in the valley, and to encourage a top-down communication strategy from their management team to their contractors and employees. And highlighting the health impacts of excessive idling. To Councillor MacLean, round 15, gone, looking for mid-month again?
Yeah, mid-month.
For round 16?
Yeah, in March, yeah.
And do you feel that kind of traction will continue throughout the year? Or will that be the last kind of kick before summer?
Well, we were planning on meeting, I believe I can't remember if it's in Cranbrook, but I think it is, that we have a scheduled meeting at the beginning of May in person for the first time.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, it will be really nice to bring us all together, and there's new people that I haven't met in person yet, but yeah, it's gaining traction, as you say.
Well, I mean, and Cranbrook Airport's pretty nice to fly into if you don't
It
want
is,
to drive for 10 hours.
Yeah, I've never flown in there, no.
Okay, I have no further discussion. Oh, thank you, Councillor. All in favor of receipt? It's carried. Just give me a second while my computer recognizes me and we'll get back. We've got time for public comment this evening. Not seeing a whole lot of folks rushing towards the podium. So I'll thank those that may or may not have wanted to have a public comment. And thereby would favor a motion to give notice to proceed to an in-camera meeting under 15.1 for one item per section 90, 1K of the community charter, discuss matters related to K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of the council could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the municipality if they were held in public. Moved by Councillor Blanchette, seconded by Councillor Mulyk. There should be no discussion, so all in favor? It's carried. That brings our open meeting to recess.